everybody else has. It's cut-through market.
Yeah, I remember actually doing some recruitment for a CRO back in way back when, before everyone knew what they were, like clinical research organizations. It's all about, they then go to recruit test subjects, and the entire thing is just a chain of things. We now all know about this, obviously, since COVID. But one of the big crises is obviously you need subjects to do testing. And without the numbers of tests, you don't pass the barrier to say that's safe. But we kind of all now know this as a result of the COVID-19 scenario, but it's a kind of a new industry, I guess. Lots of people can get into it. So
yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, they also do. I mean, they even recruit people that sell into doctors. Like people that sell to GPs and market to GPs. They even recruit people that stand in shopping centres. Finding out if you
medical surveys and stuff like this. Yeah. That's it. Just data tracking, isn't it? Very, very interesting. Very interesting. There's lots of recruitment happening everywhere. I'm very locked into technology still, because that's basically always been my game, like software technology, even not even technology, like very narrow in technology. But there's so much more recruitment happening in different sort of parts of the world, different industries I know nothing about. So actually, we should try and do a Brainfood where we visit some of these underrepresented spaces and learn about it, because we can't always talk about tech.
Healthcare, and engineering. They're the three areas that are the big ones right now. And healthcare is one that I'm spending a lot of time in.
Yeah, well, makes sense. Anyway, we're live, everybody. So welcome to Brainfood Live On Air. It's episode 126. I would say bringing it to you every Friday, but we missed last Friday because I was away, you were away, and we weren't able to actually execute on a show. So we had a little bit of a break. I hope you've enjoyed the break, but welcome back, everybody. I think it's an unbroken run now to the end of the year and beyond. And this is the show where we're always going to be having conversations with smart people about a topic that's interesting and relevant to the Brainfood community. Okay, let's do a quick sound check as we normally do. Everybody on Crowdcast, if you can hear me okay, just give me a quick comment. Let me know yes, no on the chat stream there. We should be multi-streaming this. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn page right now, if you're seeing it, can you give me some sort of comment? Yes, no, is the audio okay? And we should also be broadcasting this on the Facebook group, which, you know what, I have no idea whether that's happening, yes, not, or no. We should also be on Twitter, by the way. Twitter, this is exciting, have launched a new feature. And I'm hoping that I'm live on Twitter right now. And if I am, can you give me some sort of sign that's the case? I'm not. Don't worry. Don't worry. I knew I'd screw up somewhere. Anyway, let's.
OnlyFans? Are you live on there?
I'd love to multi-stream onto OnlyFans as well, and I'll probably, immediately get booted off the platform for being completely uninteresting and not product market fit for that platform.
not enough X-rated content.
Yeah, I don't think you could do the two together. That's not a multi-stream scenario. Okay, let's say a quick word to our sponsors who actually share our passion for the topic today. Our sponsors are an awesome UK-based assessment product called Applied. They do blind assessment screening, and I think they're positioned so well to handle this new world that we're in, where diversity, inclusion, getting away from bias is a critical part of how we think about recruiting. Be Applied were there before, I think, a lot of companies in terms of how to do that. They've got a wonderful product, so do check them out. They've also caring very much about diversity. So when I said to them, ageism, should I say, when I said, hey, we're doing Brainfood Live, you're sponsoring, what do you want to talk about? And they said, listen, I want you to actually talk more about ageism. And they are actually going to do a webinar talking about this topic as well next month. So if you're interested in this topic, folks, and you want to keep the momentum going, I recommend you can also sign up to the Be Applied webinar there, Ageism in Hiring, where I think they've got some psychologists involved and also some data scientists. So they're probably looking at it in a more technical way as to how you can potentially deal with this issue. So make sure you do check that out as well. Welcome back to Adam, I guess. I can't remember the last time you were here. A couple of weeks, I think, something like that.
Probably 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Anyway, you're down in London. We're meeting tomorrow, aren't we? We're doing a bit of a mid-afternoon meal before the big fight.
Can't wait. You're going to show me where you get the real dim sum in Chinatown.
I will do, although it's all like the deck's been shuffled completely now. So the places that were good or were bad is like, okay, we don't know anymore, because I think they've had a huge turnover of staff. Like all the chefs have just shuffled around. As you know, it's going to be all new, so it's going to be an adventure.
That place you sent me with the famous roast duck was back in August, just only the beginning of last month. That was still excellent, however. So
hit the mark. Yeah,
it really did.
That's good stuff. Yeah, we might do that again if you're up for it. I don't know. But anyway, we've got time to figure that out. All right, let's get on with the show. Actually, before we do that, we need to actually review the newsletter, don't we? So, did you read the newsletter last week, Adam? And if you did, what was interesting about it, man?
Yeah, a few things. So the first one was thanks for alerting everybody to the BBC's work life, is it? Feature. Really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed the concept of we're learning new things, aren't we, because of this pandemic that we've never had before. But like people have been excited to go back to the office, and then they've got back and gone, hold on, the vibe is not the same as it was, you know. Partially because there's not as many people there. Partially is because half the people are not shaking hands. Partially because you're standing a little bit further away from people. The vibe's not the same, and I totally understand that.
Yeah, I want to know whether that's been your experience, folks. Like, have you gone back to the office? And if so, has it been disappointing? A lot of people were thinking, yes, I got to get out of the house. I can't work here. The cats and dogs are around. The kids are driving me crazy. I need to be in the office. And then you turn to the office and it's actually all your mates on there. People are walking in and out different times. The rhythm is different. Have you had that experience, and how has that changed your view of, work from home, remote working? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear more about you from this. Is that what you've done, by the way, Adam? Because you guys have...
We've asked all of our people, what do you want to do? Do you want to work from home full time, work from the office full time, work from the office a couple of days, one day a week, work from the office a couple of days a week? And we've got the results back, so we can see what people want. And about a third of people don't want to go to the office at all. A third of people have said 1 day a week, and a third of people have said a couple of days a week. Nobody said full time. And so we're getting kicked out of our office anyway because they're turning it into a luxury hotel. But we're just gonna get membership with Regis or WeWork or something like that, and give everybody like the right amount of days that they need.
You know what? Bizarrely, Adam, it's somehow WeWork is going to bounce back on this. Before COVID, remember they were talking about the biggest bust ever. But right now, could it not be a more perfect type of business for a flexi office type scenario? Everyone gets a stipend. You can send your workers in, 100 of your workers into any WeWork in the city for this amount of days, this amount in the year. You pay this amount. It's going to be far less than your rent, but you still have options of doing this flexi labor. You wouldn't be able to do that if you were renting your leasing your own property. So I think the WeWorks, the Regises of this world, which are rebranded, aren't they? Regis, there's something else now, aren't they?
No, Regis is the brand, but they've got the company that owns Regis has got about 10 other brands. They're all different types.
Right.
And one of them is called Spaces, and that's like the equivalent to WeWork, and that's probably the one that we're going to go with.
Yeah, the cooler one. Yeah,
anybody that wants to work from home full time, they'll get an allowance. They'll get an allowance to pay for their electricity and all that kind of thing, £100 a month. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so we got together. We actually got together on Monday for an afternoon out. We went 10-pin bowling, had a meal and drinks and stuff like that, all in the one place, cool place. And the vibe was great. But I think if everybody was going back, and if we do that like every 2 months, that's much better than everybody being in the office and they're or half the people being there and it being and also it depends on the age of your workers as well. So we've got, our team is, obviously the show's about ageism, but I mean, our team on average, I think our average age is 36, right? So, we don't actually have a team that's full of people who want to go to all bar one at 5 o'clock every day, that type of thing.
Yep.
So whether that remains is going to be seen, but you got to think about what you've got.
That's interesting thing to think about, Adam, because we are going to be talking about ageism today, and I think all of us are aligned with the idea that ageism is a bad thing and it needs to be talked about, and we need to solve it in some way, or at least mitigate against it. But we shouldn't also forget that I want to ask the question as to why ageism exists. Like, why does it exist? Is there a reason behind it? Is it just nasty people? I can't believe that's true. Like, what's the cause of it? And I do wonder whether a lot of it might be to do with perceptions of life stage, perceptions of income demands or requirements, or whatever it might be, fear of senior people coming in. You get a lot of unconfident managers, for instance, that are reluctant to hire people that are more experienced because they're thinking, oh, this person's going to be a problem. So there's all kinds of reasons. I want to dig in deep into that, but you're right. I think life stage is going to be an important factor when you think about the shift to remote or not, because as you say, last thing I'd want to do is to have a beer at 5 o'clock after work with people, where I don't want to get home. I think you're at a different life stage. That's what you might prefer. Anyway, give you one more, Adam, or two more, should we say?
Yeah, the concept of an offboarding program.
Right.
Yeah, nobody does this, and they all do it so badly. And I'm involved with a number of companies now who have got ongoing alumni programs. So the person leaves, and as long as they're a good leaver, then that's marked on the HR system. They're leaving. They automatically go into a once a month. They get a newsletter just to keep them up to date with what's going on at the company they used to work for, share jobs with them, all that sort of stuff. If you don't have any kind of a decent offboarding program, and you don't have people walking out the door thinking, I loved that, it was great, I might go back there one day, then those people aren't going to give monkeys. They're not going to open your messages. They're not going to be interested. The chances of hiring them back again are none. I left a very, very large professional services firm about 15 years ago, and I don't even remember anybody actually saying goodbye to me. It was not.
There's a lot we can say about that. What are the circumstances of your exit, for instance?
It was absolutely amicable exit.
Was it like, you got 1 hour, here's your shoebox, pack your stuff?
I mean, I think I turned down. I think I turned down like leaving drinks. I was just like, nah, you're all right. I don't want to do it. But certainly that organization's never kept in touch with me. They've never sent me things, despite probably hiring at least 50 jobs in the last 10 years that I would have been great for.
Yeah, it's a miss. It's a complete miss. Like when you're hiring someone who you've hired before, they've got all that institutional knowledge already. They obviously have network already within the business. The ramp up time is going to be less, you should imagine. Plus, they've also been out elsewhere, so they've since accumulated. They're almost like being spies in the market for you. To your competitors maybe, or to customers, whatever. They come back and he's actually a plus candidate, but in order to get that person you need to offboard them properly. And a lot of companies don't do that. There's been a really good post and podcast on this which I've just shared in the chat stream, so please make sure you take a read or listen to that. Okay, one more, Adam, before we get into this.
So I think it was round about the same time that Dane Fox from Bupa was on stage at RecFest telling everybody that his favorite recruitment technology was Candidate ID. About the same time, Robin Stander was on stage with you talking about adverts and how to get more adverts coming to you, and simple tips. You put a Twitter thread, put it together and explained exactly what you need to do, but things like if your job if your job advert is just too short or too long, it's going to get less applicants. So 300 to 800 words is the best kind of length. Make your job titles shorter was an interesting one as well. Post when no others are posting. I subscribe to loads of different job posts on LinkedIn, and I always look at the ones at the weekend to see what's coming in. And I often see that they've got decent numbers of applicants compared to a lot of the ones which are posted at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, or 10:15 on a Monday morning. Terrible time to post.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually one that will surprise me. So a quick tip for everyone here, by the way, this is data from Appcast, and they basically, they're programmatic advertising. So they crunch, hundreds of millions of job adverts every year, and they can actually make a comment in terms of which are the ones that are more effective in terms of timing. And one of the things they're saying is that basically, you should post generally at the start of the week, but at the end of the month. Now, start of the week that's when candidates are most sensitive to be looking at opportunities. So Monday, Tuesday, by Wednesday, Thursday, they're into the week, they're getting their job on, they're thinking about, right, I'll look at it next week. Friday, they're on the way home, not thinking about it. So Monday, Tuesday is when recruiters should post a job. Now, they're saying you should post this at the end of the month because that's not what other recruiters do. And it means that you're able to effectively bid for a better position because it's programmatic advertising, right? You can bid at a cheaper rate for where you want your ad to be positioned at the end of the month. So let's say you're posting Monday next week, which I think is still 27th or 28th. That's optimal time to post for bit more budget. If you're going programmatic advertising route, that's when you should hit the mark because you'll get better bang for your buck there. Anyway, check out the Twitter's thread. Check out the presentation from Robin. I think he's made that freely available. It's going to be something that's really interesting and useful. Okay, let's get on with the show, Adam, because we're talking about ageism in recruiting. I know for a fact this is something you and I don't know anything about. Not to say we're young spring chickens. But what it is to say is that you and I have not actually been job candidates for several years. So we can't commentate on what it's like. I certainly can't commentate on what it's like. Last decade, going for a job. And I would say, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't be a victim of ageism, I would say, and probably neither would you. So I'd be interested to get our guests on straight away and see what their thoughts are. I want to talk about it from when is it more prevalent, what companies, why we think it happens, and what we can do about it. Okay, let's bring on Jacob. Actually, we haven't seen Jacob on the show ever, but I'm delighted to say he's joining us for this. The legendary Jacob Sten Madsen.
Just while you're bringing our guests on, can I just give a quick before, because I don't really want to talk when our guests are on because they know more about this than I do. But I can give an opinion, an uneducated opinion on this, which is when I was 23 years old, I had none of the qualities to be a business leader. So why would I ever have applied for a job or been considered for that job? So that's the first thing. The second thing, however, is I'm 44 years old. My wife's 35. She was born with the internet. She's a much better user of technology than I am because she's 9 years younger. And I'm a much better user of technology than most people my age, than most of my friends. So, ageism is an interesting thing, but it needs to be layered into a conversation about the capability to do a job. I used to work for a big global advertising business. The job that I was doing in that advertising business, which was a really reasonably sort of entry-level job, it was like a second job. I couldn't do that job just now. The skills have all changed. The techniques have all changed. The technology's changed. And I couldn't do that job because I would lose out on getting that job to somebody who was 22 years old. So, I just wanted to make a couple of quick points there, which are, you got to think practically about the capability of doing the job. So ageism should be absolutely, not a thing that exists, but capability to do the job is something that's really vital.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to focus on that. And what you're saying there is that there may be a generational component to that, which does make sense depending on your fluency with various changing techniques or processes. That makes total sense. I would not be able to drive a horse and cart, for instance. Whereas, back in the day, people who knew how to drive horses and cart, they'd be much better at that than I would. Not to say I couldn't learn it, but it's a simple matter of exposure. Anyway, let's talk to our guests because it's been great to see them. Two debutants, I think. So, firstly, Jacob Sten Madsen, well known to everyone in the Brainfood community, I think, but first time on Brainfood Live. So, Jacob, great to see you on the show. For the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do, sir?
Yo, so I'm Jacob. I'm 60 years old, and I am currently working for Nielsen, which is a global research analysis data collection company doing recruitment across Europe.
Yep, fantastic.
I just want to say something. Jacob, I had absolutely no idea you were 60 years old. I thought you were about 10 years younger than you are.
He
Really?
plays it younger, doesn't he? He plays it younger. He has the energy of a youth. Okay, we have Anne-Hermine Nicolas. How are you doing, Anne-Hermine?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Great. Can you quickly introduce yourself for the people who don't know you?
Yes, sure. I'm a recruitment professional specializing on executive hires, so headhunting, with a longer track record working for agencies and more recently working in-house. So basically my network is really composed of senior profiles. I've had a look at it. Basically, on the candidate side, I would say most of my contacts are in their mid-40s, males, engineer backgrounds, and on the client side, they're in their 50s and more diverse in terms of background, education or gender background. So on kind of a niche where typically my contacts are senior profiles. By senior, I mean experienced. And as a former executive recruiter, former head of partner recruitment at Deloitte, currently looking for a job, age 51. I'm also able to share my point of view on the job seeker side. And I think that's quite critical. I think ageism is different according to your status. It doesn't have the same impact when you have a job and you're an applicant and you answer to a job or you apply to a job description, or if you're a job seeker out of the market.
That's a really interesting insight straight away, Anne-Hermine. So I want to just dive straight into this aspect. So you're saying ageism is apparent, but its impact is, if you like, exaggerated. If you are an applicant applying for jobs, that's when you would experience ageism more so than if you're an in-work person that gets tapped up or headhunted or referred in or whatever it is. There's a perception maybe that you shouldn't be on the market at a certain age. Like we accept 21-year-old, they should be on the market. They should be job hunting, no problem. 24, 25-year-old, okay, sure, they're hustling around looking for opportunities. At the age of 50, do we suddenly feel actually you should not be active on the market? Is that how we feel about it?
Well, based on my experience, headhunting, so when I was headhunting, I would take briefs, and I've got the track record. I mean, and even I've been looking at 5 or 10 years. I had the perception that things had improved for people over 40 and 50 because we're getting with the lifetime we're getting expectancy. Thank you. I think people realize, and plus with legal aspect, we have to work later. So people and hiring managers consciously or unconsciously begin to recruit older people. So 10 years ago, it was a bit difficult to recruit, even for senior highs. Again, that's my sweet spot. People older than 40 or 45. And in the last 5 or 10 years, I recruited people, even last year, over 50, even over 55, even like at Deloitte, where they have a charter, internal charter, where at 62 you have to leave and to quit your partner role. So things are improving on the one hand. Yet when you're out of job, people consider things differently. When they design the job description, they say, well, ideally, I would be looking for 10 to 15 years experience. Never
Right,
heard
right.
someone asking for 20 or even more.
Do you know what? Let's have a look at that aspect, because maybe it starts at job design. Like when a vacancy is created, like are people, they're not thinking, hey, this may be suitable for a 55-year-old person or a 60-year-old person. They're thinking, oh, there's a 35-year-old or whatever. And an indicator of that is the degree of tenure they expect. And as you say, the most experienced I've ever seen a job description is 10 years, 10, 15 years maybe. I've never seen a job description requiring more. So perhaps it's about how jobs are created. Thoughts on this, Jacob? Have you trying to understand a little bit about why ageism exists? Do you think the job creation aspect is important, or do you think it's something else?
I think it's something else. I think it's baked into our society in respect to how we look at everything. Everything has to fit into neat boxes, into what people have of perceptions of something, and that's really where the whole thing starts. And it's kind of an aged, I would say, understanding of the world around us, and not really having followed with the times in terms of there's a fluidity in everything we do and how that whole thing hangs together. But it's almost as if we as a species can't move beyond looking at everything in a very compartmentalized basis. And that's
Right.
where I think we have a problem. And I think I'd like to go back to what Adam said is about, it is as if we are looking at other things than what really matters, because the distraction is that we are not just looking at skills. We are looking at the age of someone, where in the current world we live in, and we're all sitting behind a screen, or a lot of us are sitting behind a screen, it is totally irrelevant.
Do you think the sitting behind the screen aspect will help the situation, you two? Because the ageism side, generally speaking, 18 months or so ago, let's rewind back and jump back. For hiring 55-year-old person, 60-year-old person, maybe there's a subconscious feeling, oh, this person's going to be in the office, this person's going to be sitting next to me, maybe I don't like this. But as you say, Jacob, now that if we are moving into a fully remote thing, maybe it doesn't matter so much. Like, you're literally distant. I'm only just dealing with your output. You're dealing with my output. Can remote really help with ageism?
I would say yes, but I would the same token say that we ought to have with ourselves in our evolution moved beyond this perception of things. Okay, and this is what upsets me about this whole thing, is that a lot of it is built on perception, and putting things into boxes where, to be quite honest with you, they don't really belong.
Mm-hmm. I would say that possibly that's an interesting question that you're raising. Thinking on this bias, I have an experience. I was on an immersive experience at a startup in July, and they all had basically 26, and then the eldest, the president, general manager, were in their 30s. And when I arrived, it reminded me of my early time at Michael Page. We were 50, we were very young, and it was very, very similar setup. And I recall that there were one or two consultants in their 30s, and people not very nice with them. So I think my point is, I realized that maybe you wouldn't, thinking on the personal point of view and human approach, I'm not sure I would be happy to have my parents at my birthday party. I'm not sure. And so this is probably how people, and of course it's different in the professional arena, because you're not in the company to have a party. You're here to share experiences. You're here to work on a common goal, and you can share things. But I think that's maybe unconscious. So I'm not so to your point, remote may help because it's not easy maybe to see someone older than you. I really felt, different when I arrived at this startup. Say, good morning, madam. I say, oh, who are you talking to? Say, hi, Anne-Hermine, and nice to meet you. And please say tu. I don't know if I'm
Can I
being
comment
clear.
here, which I think, which is really the core of this. We are in the industry of recruitment. We're using the word talent. We don't even know how to define talent. Okay, there are 100 different ways to define talent. Define age. Tell me what it is that defines age. Is it that I am losing my hair? Is it that my face is starting to look old? Is it that my dance moves on the dance floor are a bit stiff? What the hell is it? Right? Excuse my language.
You were probably never a smooth mover, Jacob. Let's face it.
No, but the point is that let's try to drill down as to what is it we are actually talking about here.
Yeah.
Because age is a flipping number, right? It's and yes, it may be my dance moves being a bit stiff, but I can tell you that I still listen to dance tracks on my music player, okay, because that's my style. The point here is there is so much perception surrounding this whole subject, which is guiding why this is the way it is.
100%, Jake. I think we can all agree that perception is what's making this a reality, right? Like there's a shared perception of how people fit into buckets in terms of age. And the theory on this, obviously, you can speak to social scientists and evolutionary sort of sociologists to figure this out. I just had a brainwave. I wonder whether it's got something to do with the age stratification at education, because we end up, for instance, we all go to school with people the same age. And because we've organized our education that way, we end up graduating with the same cohort of people of the same age. We enter the work at the same group of people, and it's the same group all the way through, so that we have a problem with communicating with anybody beyond the generations that we're actually dealing with. Well, when you're thinking about how human beings, in a pre-industrial era, the longest period of time where human beings have evolved, we were much more vertically integrated as societies. We interacted with older people all the time, and we interact with younger people all the time. I did a show talking about Gen Z, and I found I couldn't actually find a Gen Z person to invite as a panelist because I literally, there's no vertical integration there. Adam, you got to say something, because what's happened is I didn't expect it, but an Amazon delivery has arrived. It's a dinosaur for my nephew. I need to get it. Take over, please.
Dinosaur being pejorative description of somebody on the panel here.
But can I say that this whole generational division is a load of bullshit? Okay, yeah. It's marketing dreamt up stuff, which has absolutely no substance in anything. Because are you telling me that because you are 30 years old or 40 years old or 50 years old, that there is such a big divide between how you think, how you see life, what aspirations you may have, this and that, the other? No, I don't buy it for a second. So this is what I come back to when I said initially, we are so good at putting things into boxes, and it must fit a neat kind of understanding or perception or whatever you want to call it. And quite frankly, it's wrong, and it's destroying a lot of things. And if we are moving the conversation on to talk about supply and demand, I am 100% convinced that any supply issue we may have at the moment could, to some degree, be dealt with if we had a different approach to age.
I think that's probably correct, but I don't think everything you said is correct. So you said like, does age define the way that you look at the world and things like that? I think it definitely does. A 22-year-old and a 52-year-old are looking at the world with totally different sets of experience, and they do talk in slightly different language as well. So every generation, every new generation of young people have got their own language. They've got their own words and things that they use, and they do look at. I mean, certainly people in my age. I'm 44. The way that I look at the world compared to a 24-year-old is definitely different. It's not because I've got more experience. It's because actually they're probably a lot more enlightened than I am. They've been brought up without a lot of baggage that I was brought up with. I was brought up when things like I don't know, class divides and racism and all sorts of other things were actually semi more a lot more accepted than somebody who's 20 years old would put up with today. So I think there is quite a big difference in the way that we look at the world. However, difference in values, very possibly not.
Can I just say one thing real quick? Because just jumping into the end of this very interesting conversation, maybe one of the things we can do, like one of the big decisions we have to make, is to say, look, do we assume that the age of the person doesn't matter at all, or do we accept that it might do, but that may not be a bad thing? So, for instance, it's almost like, what is diversity? Are we sometimes one of the inherent challenges of diversity is to assume that everyone is generally the same underneath this color of the skin, or everyone's generally the same irrespective of biology. Therefore, we should ignore, if you like, the differences that are manifest. Whereas maybe a better way to think about it is to say, look, people are different, marginally, very small margins, they are different, but we should appreciate what those differences are, because it actually is true diversity to be able to build a culture where those differences are actually embraced. So it's almost like we can't be age blind, because if we say, oh, everyone's the same, that's like denying the relevancy of this person's lived experience. Because as you say, someone who's coming in, 30 years experience in business, has been through all kinds of different things, has gone through a life journey and all this type of stuff, they're going to bring to the table a different perspective than someone who's just coming out of university with a very narrow perspective. And that person at university will bring other things, the modernity, let's say, new ideas, obviously a high energy level based on the biological kind of reality of things. But there'll be a different component. So maybe the ideal team actually needs to have an age component to it, rather than say we need to be age blind. What do you think about that, folks? Should we be age blind, ignore people's age completely? Is that the way to go? Or should we just accept that people are different and actively target, like have different, if you're going to hire 8 people, one of those people should be around 50, 60 years old. Anne-Hermine, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, we're not.
By the way, got it.
So in France, we're not supposed to mention age anymore, in our market mappings, profiles, etc. It's been the law for, I think, 10 years or so. And still the first thing my clients ask when I present a profile or present a mapping is, okay, how old is he? How old is she? So it always comes down to the table and very early, and that's the way it is. But I think there are other constraints in France too. The severance package, is that the word, for people over 50 is higher than below 50. So I think in somewhere in people's head, whether HR directors or presidents or business unit leaders, it may be conscious or unconscious again, but I think it has, been counterproductive. Counterproductive. Thank you. It was supposed to help people over 50 not to be dismissed, and in the end, on the French market, people don't hire.
Yeah, that's
hire because of
the risk. When you put worker protections in, ultimately it increases the risk for the employer. Therefore, the employer will try and mitigate the risk by not hiring that type of person. So I think there's lots of evidence of if you like, perverse incentives this way. We have to understand that companies, at least private companies, It's maybe different in public sector, for instance, but private profit-oriented businesses will be making decisions based on the lowest amount of risk, highest amount of return. That's how capitalism works, right? So if we're going to reject this, we'll be rejecting a fundamental tenet as to how a lot of our societies are built. Maybe we should do that, but let's not like lay the blame entirely at the company level. Okay, guys, I know time is like
Can I come back to another important point, which is what Adam made, which is, you know, or touched upon. You can be an old 60-year-old, or you can be a young 60-year-old. Okay, you did not know my age, Adam. Okay, it has been maybe a big revelation to you, or whatever. Okay, I have a brother-in-law who decided when he was 60 he was old, and he hasn't moved on since then. Okay, so again, this is we need to move away from this whole thing, right? We need to look at each individual as they are, with their skills, whatever the capability they have. I have a 63-year-old wife who has just landed herself the most senior role she has had in her entire career. Okay, I mean, if that isn't fly straight in the face of ageism, I don't know what does, right?
Right.
And this is again, you know, we have to move away from this whole thing about boxing things into, you know, certain, you know, understanding, because it's so wrong.
I agree, by the way. I've got a 60-year-old CTO, and he doesn't come across as 60 years old. He comes across as he's in his 40s because of his attitude. So, you know, I really do agree with you about that. Age is a number. How you act, how you deal with that as you get older is really important.
All right, so I want to move on to what we can do about this, okay? Because time is flying through. So I want to look at it from both the job seeker perspective and also from the employer/recruiter perspective. Now, you know, I don't want to go in and say, listen, it's not on the job seeker to do anything. It's all on the employer. We have to give practical advice to people out there listening, because there's a person on the chat stream there who said he's been looking for 2 years on the market. Let's help this person. So what practical advice can you two give to job seekers out there in the market that are basically getting and experiencing this ageism? One bit of advice each. Anne-Hermine, let's go with you first.
Yeah, well, my tips would be more on the employer side, because I'm really dying to have these tips on the job seeker, being looking for 6 months for a job. But and I was about to ask Jacob. I know he's deeply convinced that age is not an issue, but what do you do, and how do you do that with the hiring managers? Because I myself believe it's our job as a talent acquisition, as an agency, to ask the hiring managers why. Why do you want someone only in his 40s? Why are you refusing someone in 56? Mind you, I recruited a CIO of 56 years old, and when we were about to make the offer, the president said, this 56, I'm wondering if we are not making a mistake. And the HR director said, thankfully, well, I'm 55. Do you mind? And how old are you? He was 56. So it's really probably the tips would be for us, talent acquisition, executive recruiters, to ask, to put into perspective as smoothly as possible, to give examples, okay, because he would say, well, it's easier, it's more adaptable, or he or she will cost less, etc., or less risky probably. And so my advice would be really for us to struggle and help, because it's unconscious, you know. I think it's really unconscious.
Yeah. Let me just come straight in there, and I mean, what you're saying is it's the responsibility of TA to really elevate kind of age bias as one of the diversity factors when we're speaking to hiring managers. We can't just be hyper focused. We obviously need to care about diversities of all types, but this includes very much ageism.
Exactly.
And we need to educate the hiring managers, even educate ourselves, because we're sometimes also, you know, partially this way. particularly if we can, we get the sense that the hiring manager, for instance, if you weren't strong enough and you know that they're not happy with a 50-year-old person, whatever, for irrational reasons, you might end up saying, okay, I'm going to deliver to what this person wants. You're part of the problem in this case. You need to push back on that. Okay, go to you, Jacob. Give us one tip an employer can make. Only one tip. We don't have too much time.
Yeah, blind. Go blind.
Okay, tell me.
Okay.
What do you mean?
I want to have all my hires be done blindly. Okay, I don't want to know anything about your age, your sex, your background. I just want to know, can you do the job or not? That's it. Okay.
Right.
And
So
I want to select you purely on that basis. Okay,
Jacob,
and
I get it. I have to stop you, Jacob, because time is like flying. What you're saying is that basically you take away some of the information at the top of the funnel. You're talking about, hey, let's take away the name, take away the gender, take away the ethnicity. You go blind at the top, which is what actually Apply do, by the way. So check this out. And then we deal with it later on down the line, because at some point, obviously, you might interact with somebody. But hopefully you'll get more diversity through that way by rather than having a prejudicial screen up front.
I can tell you it works because I've done it. Okay, I can tell you it works, and I have increased my pipeline in a very talent scarce market with 30%. Okay, and cut down my chances or whatever. There are people who say, oh, no, you're just pushing it further down the stream, okay? And the bias will creep in at some point. To that, I would just like to say, I'd like to have the conversation with a hiring manager who has set a range of criteria for someone coming back to me and said, oh, that person is too old, or I don't think so because so-and-so. When you have led them through the path of, well, you have agreed to all these things being important and being the criteria we were looking for. Are you now telling me because of date of birth or because of color of their skin or sex that they can't do the job? That is a load of absolute nonsense.
Right. So basically, I think that's a good counter argument to the critique, which says, oh, you're pushing it down the line. I would agree with you, Jacob. Sometimes pushing it down the line is actually a solution, because it makes it harder to object against the candidate that actually completes fulfills the requirement for the job. It forces the hiring manager to confront their bias, and oftentimes when that's surfaced up, they're reluctant to articulate that, and then they realize themselves, oh, maybe it was a prejudicial thing. Listen, I've got to bring on Joe and Dorothy. So thank you, Anne-Hermine, and thank you, Jacob, for joining the show. Would love to get you back. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh crap. Did I just get rid of you there, Adam?
No.
All right, cool. I don't know. Things are just happening all over the place. It's complete chaos. Right, let's get Joe Weech on because she's been waiting all this time. I think that's Joe. Okay, I think it is. Let's just hope it is. And we get
knows a lot about this subject.
Absolutely. And in fact, both of these two coming on, I think, well, they'll introduce themselves in due course. So they're going to know what the situation is, I think, from both sides, because I think Dorothy does coaching, and I think Joe's done coaching as well. So this is, I think, very good for the job seeker side. There she is. Joe Weech, how are you doing?
Doing really brilliantly. This has been quite an animated discussion over here on chat.
It has. It's been great to talk through these points. Joe, for the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself to the crowd?
Yes, ever so quickly. I have been working in both sides of the house, human resources and talent acquisition, and have been a job seeker. So I will definitely like to address this topic from all three of those perspectives. I have, a few years ago, experienced such dramatic age discrimination that I wrote an article about it. It went viral. The Association of Talent Acquisition Professionals wrote their first white paper about age discrimination because of the article that I wrote. And so in a way, all of the things that have happened since then have made me like a poster child, for old age. And because I have my grades, I'll take it. So I'm older than everybody here, but not quite as old as my esteemed colleague, Jerry Crispin. I am trying to catch up with him and just hope I will be as relevant and as sharp as he is when I do.
Well, there's the example right there. Jerry is a person like all bleeding edge at every age. You know what I mean? The guy's like doing awesome stuff. Hi to you, Jerry, by the way. And we've got Dorothy here as well. Dorothy, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you and what it is you do?
Hi, I'm based in Brussels. I'm an international talent management strategist. I work in executive search and HR consulting, and I'm doing a lot of work with organizations that are de-biasing their recruitment processes and their talent pipelines. So it's about gender balance, diversity, and inclusion. And I am a coach as well, but that's
Fantastic.
a piece of it.
Okay, I want to get us to be super narrow on this, so I'm going to have to be a bit disciplined on this, folks. I hope you're going to join me with this. Let's look at it from the employer side first, right? You two have both been senior people on the shoulder of the CEO, they're recruiting, etc. How do you kind of educate them to be more open-minded, I guess, as to a range of candidates from different age brackets? And how do you actually confront them when you've identified subconscious age bias? I think it's probably quite prevalent. Probably most of these leaders have it. So how do you talk to them about it? Any thoughts? Go to you first, Dorothy.
Well, I'm with Jacob a lot on what he said. I think that ageism is baked into the system. I'm going to say something a little bit contentious. I have written about this. I don't think you should be in recruitment if you haven't done unconscious bias training. So I just think there shouldn't be anyone allowed to hire people without having done the training. So but also just going to one lunch and learn for 2 hours, check. That doesn't work. It has to be ongoing. So that's my first tick. The second one, I think, is in this, I call it scoping. I don't know what you call it. When you're actually with the hiring manager, you're mapping out the profile, you're finding out what the requirements of the job. And they say, well, I want an MBA and it has to come from this school and we need 10 years of experience. We want this and that. And it's about going back and saying why. Right. And I think particularly when we saw that exercise or that report that came out, I think it was from McKinsey Accenture about the hidden candidate market, not just the hidden job, but the hidden candidate market. We've got this massive skill set gap. So I would like to see talent development more involved in talent acquisition, because to Adam's point, Adam, you made a point at the beginning saying that you couldn't do your entry level job now because of the changes. But the thing is, you could learn, right? You could retrain. So I think it's about all of these things and just getting a more open mindset. And age is not even a number for me, it's an attitude. And I can't give my credit card number than tell you my age. But I suspect I'm probably the oldest person here.
Well, Dorothy, thank you so much for those points. I think first one, it's job design right at the beginning of the flow when people are imagining the person, who's the ideal candidate. That's when a recruiter needs to be able to have the conversation and really unpack and take away some of these prejudices, because it has to be hyper focused on what the function of the job is and how it, what the outputs are. That's where the focus is, rather than the imaginary ideal candidate. And love the idea of training. I think that really rolls across the hiring managers as well. I'd love to see a situation where anybody who's promoted into a role where they have responsibilities for growing their team, subconscious bias training or any kind of training of this type needs to be a mandatory component of this, rather than them just being elevated to a management position, right? I mean, it's like that happens all the time. No one gets, there's a crisis of training managers. So lots of good ideas there. Joe, let's go quickly to you. Again, same question. You're working with a CEO, you're working with hiring managers. How do you make sure that they are not subconsciously putting in age bias into their process, their thinking?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I am in 100% violent agreement with Dorothy that talent acquisition has to have, unconscious bias training before they do their jobs. But I would say it's HR's job to make sure all the hiring managers also have the same training, because it is so universal that it's become acceptable. The okay boomer, let's just start there. We don't say anything derogatory, about millennials in that same way, right? So when you look at what people think about in companies, that Perennials will cost more money, be inflexible or rigid, think they know more or best, and tell everyone what to do. Well, what is that? That's people describing their parents. So it really starts there. So HR is very much responsible in dispelling all the myths and making sure that the data talks, and there's plenty of data out there. Torrin Ellis and I were just speaking about this a few weeks ago. And really where HR needs to take the reins is that they need to ensure that multi-generational teams are created in environments that are conducive to intergenerational relationships. That's on HR. And for mentorship, training, teaming, succession planning, so much knowledge is going out the door because HR didn't plan, to be able to retain and have mentorship, right? And have them boomerang back on a part-time basis, if you will, to consult for people that are coming up. And then from the talent acquisition side, I believe that I never want to hear of another recruiting saying you're overqualified. Oh, and quick job seeker tip. If a recruiter tells you are overqualified, you know what you say? Yes, you are telling me I have all of the qualifications for this role and then some. When do I start?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And you know what, Joe? I think you're so right about the responsibilities maybe of HR to start stitching these generational sort of groups together. I think we talked about this earlier about how we stratify sort of our cohorts in terms of age. We typically are best friends from school onwards with the same age group of people. And that's really fractured our intergenerational relationships. And I think maybe a big part of this comes from this type of way we structured education. But let's switch really quickly to the job seeking side, as we're talking about it already. We've already had a few people say, hey, you should disguise the age identifiers in a CV. I read a really good post on this a couple of weeks ago. One lady did this and actually did go ahead and convert. It was a successful tactic for her. Regardless of whether this is right or wrong from an ethical point of view, is it the right advice from a practical point of view? This person is interested, looking for work, struggling for 2 years, as someone is in the chat stream. Should they go ahead and try and disguise how long they've been working, how old they are? Thoughts on this? Dorothy, go to you first.
I would say you're not disguising it. But you're just not putting it out. For example, I as someone who sees CVs regularly, I noticed in the chat someone was say use a functional CV, not a chronological CV. I hate functional CVs with a passion.
Right.
And normally
no good on functional CVs, okay?
That's a red flag, right? So my inclination would be to tell you to maybe put the last 15 years of experience and take out your year of graduation. We know you're over 50. If you don't put your year of graduation, we know you're over 50. But what happens is that you probably will go through any automatic ATS tracking, so that you will, unless they tick the button not to put the box, not to put year of graduation, you will at least filter through. And then it's about owning who you are, I think. And that's why I say age is an attitude. It's about staying up to date with the tech.
Right. So two
interviews.
Two tips there. Just want to reiterate, we should kind of restructure the CV. Last 15 years only. Anything before that, it may be insignificant, but it's still something you can bring up at a later point when you're further through the process. You're not going to get away. We're not saying you're not how old you are. We're just saying, look, here's the most relevant stuff most recently. Give that, and then take away some of the age signifying information, such as graduation dates and so on. Even though if people are super motivated, they can figure it out. But at least you're not explicitly pushing it, giving them a reason to say no, basically. Any more tips before we ask the same question to Joe on this, Dorothy?
Yeah, getting familiar with the tech. It's what I call faffing around.
Right.
And honestly, I
Classic
do it
British
myself.
word.
I've got my glasses on and I'm looking and but it's about becoming familiar with the tech, and particularly with things like automated interviews, with all the different ways of doing and applying. You've just got to become familiar with it, become comfortable, and understand that that is how things are done. And
right.
There are younger people who can't do it. It's not a question of age, but for all age groups.
But on this note, it's absolutely right as well, because probably you're already carrying the hiring manager is already potentially prejudicial in a subconscious way that you may not be able to handle a video interview or something like this. You need to absolutely be able to nail that without question and eliminate any kind of evidence that will back up that prejudicial view. Okay, I go to you with the same question, Joe. Yeah, Adam, you got to go. That's totally cool.
Sorry. Thanks, everyone. Enjoyed it.
No worries.
Thanks, Dorothy. Bye, Joe.
Bye. I'm
Joe,
going to. Yes.
job seeker advice.
Job seeker advice. Use the pandemic to proactively dispel the myths that you are going to, that you would be bored in a particular role because, you are overqualified. Talk about how you learned in the pandemic about what really matters, and you're definitely not going to be chasing, a career ladder that you just love doing XYZ that this role would enable you to do. And that it's not always about being bored or being challenged, but just doing meaningful work and making a contribution where you can wake up every day and say, I'm really so happy I get to do this work. Additionally, when it comes to the compensation, just say we understand that many different compensation packages have been affected by, the pandemic. And so I just want you to know that I am very flexible. And in 26 jurisdictions in the United States, it's illegal to ask your current or previous salary history. I think this just would be globally universal, but I think that you can just say, is this particular, number that I'm looking for within your range, so that way you can have that conversation from the get-go. One more thing to dispel would be that, how do you feel? First of all, recruiters, please don't ever ask when somebody's, thinking about retiring. It's like the most offensive question I think that we are being asked. It's like, I would like to put that back on you. Oh, so have you been thinking about retirement? When are you targeting to end working? Just don't ask that question. But also head those things off with, it's really not about a particular time. As long as I can continue to make meaningful contributions, and stay relevant in my role, I would just like to continue to be able to have the opportunity to do that. So you never answer that question with a date or a number. And so I guess those are the biggest ones.
I'm going to step in now because there's too many great points, and people are not going to be able to, hope someone's writing this down. So the first thing that you mentioned I thought was really interesting was to say that there is a perception of your ambition. So in other words, people might think, oh, this person's overpowered for the job. This person's already been head of this, a C-level of that. They're applying for my job. I don't think that's right, because surely he or she would not be interested in the level of job I have. And what you're saying is, what you can say in this context is to be very explicit up front and handle it before the critique comes in. In other words, make a statement on your cover letter or your email you're coming in with, or even put it on the resume or CV to say, I'm looking for this type of role. This is my motivation. The career track thing that's been done. I don't necessarily need to be in charge of 500 people. I want to deliver to this type of thing. And then that would help remove the problem in the mind of the recruiter or the screener or the individual that has that concern.
And one more thing, in reporting into someone younger, just say, I really love working in multi-generational teams. Studies have shown that, the collaboration amongst, people with varying backgrounds and expertise will be much more optimal for success in a company.
Wow. You want to say that again? People, please write these words down, because I think they're so powerful. Joe, I hope you don't mind me asking you to repeat exactly what you just said, last 5 seconds.
Okay. So, regarding working for someone younger, talk about how you love working in multi-generational teams, because studies have shown that collaboration amongst people of differing expertise and backgrounds will produce more success in companies.
That's like a show-stopping, winning, let's offer this person a job type of commentary. That's fantastic. But it's also a great example of how you can frame the situation. So you're not trying to disguise the situation. You just you're forcing this person to actually rethink the prejudice. And of course, why wouldn't anybody think, yeah, a multi-generational team, that makes sense. I like the sound of that. And it suddenly becomes a viable, not only viable but desirable thing to try and achieve. Let's talk about salary, Dorothy and Joe. A concern for a lot of hiring managers, recruiters, and all this would be, Joe's earned 250K before, we were only paying 60 or whatever. It's like, hey, this person's going to jump into the company. It's a stepping stone, a temporary stop before she goes off and gets something better. How do we handle a money conversation to say, this salary is okay? How do we say this? Dorothy, any thoughts on this?
I think you just have to address it. I mean, because I've been in that seat where I've seen that someone is very highly paid and this is much lower. So I think it's about showing commitment as a job seeker, showing commitment that to the organization, how you'd be challenged by the job, you're looking forward to making a contribution, and all those other nice things. And you might even, and I think one of the things that about being older, you might have your house, right? You might have traveled all you want. You might have other things that you have some money in the bank, or you've got property or whatever. And you are possibly less likely to leave than a younger person who really needs to earn a load of money to buy a house. So, I mean, I would just say, listen, I've got where I am. I'm very comfortable, or I'm fine. I'm happy. And this is completely in line with my goals, which are whatever your goals are.
All right, so let's sort of unpack this a little bit more, Dorothy. You're saying that we should preemptively, an older person, an older candidate should preemptively say, money is not the driver. You've already achieved your financial ambitions because you've earned this. Because the concern is, this person's too expensive. You say, I've already earned this level. No mortgage, no kids have gone off, universities dealt with, etc., all that type of stuff. And you can say, look, what you're looking for is work content, ability to contribute, and a salary that is respectable. But it's not. It sort of doesn't have to be on this type of trajectory.
It's not
one
for
thing
me.
you don't.
That's the way I would approach it. What would you say, Joe?
Well, first of all, you took all of the words out of my mouth. I 100% agree. Look at my CV. You see that I have done, C-suite level work, and so here's why you should hire me. It's because I've already had the roles and I've already climbed the ladder. I've already had the titles. I've had the compensation. I'm just now really looking to do meaningful work and to be aligned with the mission, vision, values of the company. And when you look at the fact that 49% of people who are under the age of 50 will leave, unexpected turnover. And so I think that you should definitely hire me because you will not risk losing me to a competitor with a carrot.
Yeah, I think that's just amazing
advice.
Again,
very aligned, actually. There's one thing that I would add in, which we haven't talked about, is the emphasis on soft skills. If you look at the World Economic Forum, the skills of 2030, 8 of them are soft skills. So I think that is the value that older generations bring to the table in general, not always, but in general, that they have perfected or worked on their soft skills. So hard skills can be learned and soft skills can be learned as well, but they're much harder to acquire. So I think that is a massive contribution. Bringing this wisdom and experience is a bonus, not a disadvantage.
Yeah, we need to, I think what's coming clear from the conversations we've had from all of our wonderful panelists is that we have to own the situation. You're not there just to deny it. There's no point. You've just earned all of the experience that you've had. I mean, this is the value you can bring, is that simply that organizations have not been able to see the value or unlock it. As a candidate, you need to be able to reframe your experience as a plus rather than as a minus. Actually, Joe, I think it was you that mentioned something about the ability to maybe work in a more flexible way with companies. So, for instance, rather than purely going full-time employee, for instance, it could be there's other ways in which you could interact with a company or interact with a hiring a vacancy that might end up suiting that company better. because a lot of jobs out there, they end up just defaulting to being full-time, when in fact, you know what, the focus of the job isn't going to be 40 hours a week or whatever. It doesn't require that. So maybe that's also an angle that the all candidates, I would say, but potentially people who are veteran candidates that are involuntarily on the market, maybe is also something they can put into their the way in which they communicate their availability.
I also know of people who have interviewed, and when they felt like it wasn't going to result in an offer, have offered to say, well, it seems like in this conversation that, these are, your top 3 challenges. Would you consider hiring me on as a consultant, to help you come up with strategy and tacticals, for, solving those? And those people, when they've gotten in and people saw how really, congenial they were, that they got along well with everyone and everybody looked up to that person and wanted their advice because they were humble, hearted about it, that they ended up in converting into full-time roles, and people. And so I think it's always just a strategy to make sure that you give people a chance to give you a chance, if you will.
Yeah, I love that as well, because sometimes the hiring person or the hiring squad, they may be inexperienced, or they certainly haven't had the training. I think, Dorothy, you mentioned it's not by any means common that people get trained in subconscious bias, right? So we all are kind of, minuscule. In fact, very, very few people have this. So they also need to help. If you like, additional options to say yes to this person, and that may be something that the job seeker can control. Okay, we're running way out of time, so I want to just again give you two an opportunity to say one thing to an older job seeker who's really struggled, to get in. The things aren't working. What would you advise them to keep in mind as they go and try and find that next role? Again, I'm thinking of the person that maybe was commenting earlier, on the market for 2 years, knocking on a door, very, very frustrating. It's not working. What would you say to that person? How would they? How should they handle the next step? Dorothy, go to you on that.
I mean, obviously, I can't go into specifics, but I mean, one of the things, it's about approaching the problem with the same solution over and again and expecting to get success. I would be inclined to step back and look at the strategy and identify exactly where that person, not necessarily the person on this call, but you're going wrong. So is my CV getting lost? Am I getting cut at interview? Am I not getting interviews? So identifying where the problem lies. And then I probably would get some help. And it might mean that you just have to change your strategy and do something completely different. But I mean, I think the gentleman said he was like only 51 or something. Well, that's like a baby. So I think that I think it's probably there might be something going wrong there somewhere. So step back and look again.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is just keep grinding gears, right? I mean, because that can just be depleting your morale, and you can end up in a really bad psychological state. Mentally, it's very damaging. And ultimately, that ends up manifesting as well. It ends up contributing to the problem because you might end up being super frustrated. People can feel that. And then that's difficult, even more difficult for employers to look positively that way. So definitely monitor your own morale. Make sure, track how you're going. If you've gone too long and it's not working, then it's definitely time to stop and reflect and figure out maybe there's other techniques. Joe, go to you with the final word.
With one more, this is more of a fun tip. That on Zoom, if you go into your screen, you've got touch up your appearance. So you push that button right to the top. And a lot of people don't know about that, but it's really worth using.
Honestly, it's a fun thing, but the truth of the matter is how you come across on camera is now actually really, really important because it's the new business suit. It's the new first impression. Remember that there's prejudice. So if people have the feeling, oh, this person's an older candidate, they're not going to be very tech savvy, etc. And you're in there and the lighting's terrible, the sound isn't good, or whatever it is, all these things that you can't fix, they'll help that prejudice grow. So you've got to really just think about how do you look, how in terms of the lighting, the audio, the sound, the impression that you give. Okay, Joe, final word on you.
Okay, so I put my LinkedIn profile. Please click on that. Send me a note saying resources. I wrote an article about job search tips for people who are 40 and over after querying 30 recruiters for their advice. I also, if you message me, I have a resource. Actually, it's 2 sheets of all of these links that would be very helpful for you in terms of your job search. It goes out to people who are retiring from government work. So it would be definitely relevant for you. And my one tip about being on camera is that whether you are male, female, non-binary, or whatever, use matte powder. Why? Because if you don't do that, whatever light you're using is going to shine off your face and your head if you're follically challenged. So make sure that you're doing that, because this is not interviewing in real life, right? This is interviewing on camera. So you need to use the tricks of the trade in terms of that. I cannot more highly recommend that. And elevating your laptop so you are looking directly at the little dot. Don't look at the person's face on the screen because it looks like you're looking down. Look directly at that dot and it looks like you're looking right at them.
That's brilliant advice, and I probably need to send an order for the matte powder, because I can actually feel myself sweating here, and I can even see the gloss reflect. This is no bueno.
Richard Nixon actually felt that he lost the debate, and the election to John F. Kennedy because he showed up on a debate and you could see him sweating, and he was as white as a ghost, whereas John F. Kennedy used professional makeup.
That's how you do it. Use makeup. It's going to help you. Okay, I forgot to say this, folks, but I'm going to try and do this every week. So if you do have your LinkedIn and you want to continue the conversation with all of the people you've had access to today, share your LinkedIn right now in the chat stream, and then please go ahead and connect with everyone who shared that link. And then if you want to continue the conversation either with Dorothy or with Joe or with Jacob or with Anne-Hermine or with me or with anybody else here in this group, in the chat stream, go ahead and do that. Don't let this be a bottleneck. We're trying to get as many people involved in this conversation as possible. Okay, that's about it, folks. We're well out of time. I do apologize for my poor time management on this. Joe and Dorothy, so wonderful to see you both, and so wonderful to get you on Brainfood Live. If you're up for it, I'd love to invite you back. And we'll talk on this and other topics, because it's ageism is obviously a hugely important issue. But the interactions we've had with both of you, or I've had with both of you, have involved all kinds of different topics. So we'll make sure that we'll get you involved in future Brainfood Lives as well. Okay, that's about it, everybody. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much, Dorothy. You two have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Weren't they great? And I really should have had more time for both Joe and Dorothy. I think they both said some amazing things. And yeah, please do connect with those two. I'll send an email around to everybody with everyone's links on there, but feel free to connect with them directly if you have. If you want to do so straight away. They're both people that can help any job seeker, but maybe particularly people who have been veterans in the world of work. Okay, that's about it, everybody. If you've enjoyed the show, follow the channel. We're back every Friday. Next week, we're going to be talking about another aspect of diversity. How do you diversify the talent pipeline? In particular, do you take more information or do you take less? In other words, we're talking about the blind versus the targeted approach. What is the best way to do this, particularly for engineering and technical roles? So if you're interested in that, make sure you sign up. Okay, that's about it, everybody. We'll see you all next week.